Alright, welcome back to the tank tutorial. In the last video I did say I was going to show you how to make it so that the turret rotated a lot more slowly towards the mouse. And you can see that I've accomplished that here, but the complexity in doing that required quite a lot of mathematical understanding of angles and other things such as absolute values. So I'm not actually going to go into that. If you want a tutorial on it, please request it below, and I'll make an example that you can follow along. But keep in mind that it is fairly complicated, and I don't want to go into that for year 10 or year 11 digital technology. So I've also slowed down my movement speed here. So I've done that in the create event for the tank. So I've changed the movement speed and the turn speed. Turret speed is for rotating the turret, and you don't need that in there. Your turret will instantly snap to the mouse. Looks a bit funny, but for now it'll be fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an enemy tank. For this I created another tank and I've put the turret on it. Okay, so I'm not going to have the turret separate on this one. The tank's always going to just pretty much point towards the player. In this case, it's going to move towards the player. The player's goal is going to be to destroy as many tanks as they can, and these tanks are going to come in off the side of the screen. So we're going to add in a new tank here, and I'm going to create a new object, obj enemy tank, and it's going to use the enemy tank sprite. And in here we're going to have an event, and this event is going to be the create event. Okay, so when it gets created, I'm going to add in a few variables, and these variables are going to be very similar to the tank parent. In fact, they're going to be exactly the same. Tank speed equals 4. I might make it 2. And what's the other one? Turn speed. And I'm going to call this tank speed, I'm going to actually call it move speed, equals 2. The turn speed is actually not necessary in here, so I'm going to leave it out. We're just going to have move speed. Alright, so that's the create event for that one. The move speed is going to equal 2. Now I can use the same variable name as I've used in here. You can see I've got move speed in here, and in this one I've also got move speed. These two variables are different even though they've got the same name. You see, this variable belongs to the object enemy tank, and this variable move speed belongs to the object tank player. Later on we'll create a global variable where the one name will apply to a single variable that every single object can use. But at the moment, only the enemy tank, every instance of the enemy tank has its own move speed variable, and every instance of object tank player has its own move speed variable. We only have one instance of object tank player, but there is going to be a few instances of object enemy tank. By putting this variable in, we'll be able to change the speed of it. Say if it runs over a power-up or gets stuck in some mud, we can slow it down, speed it up, etc. So let's go ahead and start to create that. So on here, the create event, we are going to immediately set its direction to point in the direction. Actually, we won't do this in the create event. We'll create a step event for it. So the step event, as you remember, happens every single frame. And it's basically, if you've used Scratch, it's basically a forever loop. If you've used any other programming language, it's essentially like typing while true into the code window. So the step event, everything it does, every single frame, never stops. Direction equals point direction, and we're going to use self.x, self.y. So that's this object's x and y. And the other object we're going to use, or the other x direction, is the object tank player. So it's going to pretty much just run towards the object tank player. Okay, that's its direction. And we're going to set its speed equals move speed. So what will happen if I go into my room and I put a few of these tanks in here, the enemy tank, I'll put 3 of them. I might actually set their speed to 1. I don't want them going too fast. Oh, that's my player. If I set the speed to 1. So they're slowly moving towards me. Now, of course, there is a problem. I have forgotten in the step event to update the graphics. So image angle equals direction. Okay, so now I've got these enemy tanks constantly pointing towards me. My turret, I can shoot. And there's no interaction between anything yet. Nothing happens if the tanks run into me. All that happens is they will eventually get to the middle and then start to spin around like that. There are ways to fix that, but we're not going to worry about it because we're going to make it so that as soon as an enemy tank touches me, or as soon as I get hit by an enemy bullet, then the armor goes down and will be destroyed and it'll be game over. So let's go ahead and make the enemy tank interact with this object bullet. And we can do that with a collision event. So a collision event, we can select what object it's going to collide with. So when it collides with object bullet, we're going to do a few things here. Now, it's actually easier to do this here in the drag and drop. So destroy the instance, we want to destroy the other instance. I'll show you how to do this in code in just a moment though. So, and we also want to destroy self. Okay, so that is how we do it in here. Unfortunately, drag and drop's not very helpful here. It doesn't say destroy the other instance unless you mouse over it. It even doesn't say it then. And it takes ages for it to come up. So the only way to see what it's actually destroying is by double clicking on it. So code is a bit more complex. First, we have to use with. Now what this does is I type in a keyword and other is the keyword here. This means the other object in the collision. Other generally only works in collision events and it keeps track of what the other object is. And so I can say with other instance destroy. And then I can say instance destroy. Because this here is inside these code blocks, these little squiggly braces, it will act on the other object. And then this code here, destroy self, I'll just put a comment there. And here I'll put a comment, destroy other. So this code is outside of the with other and it just acts as though it's on this object. And so it destroys itself. So that should work. There's nothing fancy happening at the moment. So I should be able to destroy those pretty easy. Now there are a few little neat things that you can do in Game Maker just to make it look a little bit better. We can actually go to the draw actions down here. And oops, I've added 2 of those. But I'll probably use both. We can create an explosion at X and Y. If you just put 0, 0, 0, 0 is the top left corner of the room, but X and Y is the X and Y position of this enemy tank. I'll make a medium-sized explosion and I'll make it orange. Red, actually. And it's going to be above objects. I'll tick that. This one is going to be a small explosion at XY. And it's going to be orange. And it's going to be above objects. And lastly, I will create smoke, not smoke up, because that kind of makes it rise up. It's for platformers. And that's going to be large, and that's going to be black. And it will be below objects. Click OK. So let's see what happens here. It might be a bit over the top. Okay, so I've got a little explosion happening and it all looks pretty neat. So next step is to actually start to keep track of a score and also to have something that creates those enemies outside of the room. So that's going to be the next video. We're going to look at global variables in there. So keeping track of score, keeping track of the player's health, keeping track of how much ammo the player has, and a few other things. So we'll look at that in the next few videos.